In recent weeks, Russia has made significant progress in Donbass and has opened a new front in the Kharkov Oblast, from where it had been expelled in October 2002. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian government is facing serious difficulties after having spent a large amount of resources on its failed counteroffensive, while the armament, economic and logistical support from its allies seems insufficient. In this context, many specialists believe that a Russian victory is imminent, and that it is only a matter of time before Ukraine surrenders. The later it does, the more complicated the peace negotiation will be. That is, it would lose more territory. This is very clear in the Kremlin, so the Vice President of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, presented a map of a possible partition of Ukraine that includes a solution to satisfy European allies. That's why today we ask ourselves, what if Ukraine is divided? Interested? Go ahead, then stay until the end of the video. To start, let's broadly look at what the situation is on the battlefront. Initially, Ukraine managed to repel the Russian invasions on the fronts of Kiev in the center, Kharkov in the northeast, and Kherson in the south. However, on the Donbass front, where the war began in 2014, it has always faced difficulties. Probably the turning point was the Ukrainian counteroffensive carried out between June and November of 2023, which turned out to be a resounding failure. Ukraine did not achieve its goal of expelling the Russians from Crimea and Donbass, which resulted in considerable material and human wear and tear as Russia began to take the initiative. Since then, the Russian advance has been significant. Ukraine's desperation is reflected in President Zelensky's constant visits to Western countries to secure new aids that are not fully materialized, as well as in the drastic measures adopted, such as making it difficult for men of recruitment age who are outside the country to obtain a passport. On the other hand, Western economic sanctions against Russia have not had the desired effect, as the Russian economy remains stable. In fact, Russia has grown more than the G7 countries in the last 2 years, and its armament production machinery continues to operate without interruptions. As the Russian advance continues, the negotiation conditions will harden, and Russia will demand more territories. Having said that, let's travel to a parallel universe with the following conditions. The Ukrainian government continues with its policy of resistance and is reluctant to negotiate, hoping that Western allies will continue to provide their support. However, most European countries, seeing their economies weakened, choose to reduce this military support, with which they never fully fulfilled their promises. The turning point comes in November 2004 when Donald Trump is elected President of the United States. With his policy of less interest towards Europe and Russia given his fixation with China, China opts to reduce support for Ukraine. Since most of the support came from Washington, this is critical. The Russian offensive is advancing across southern Ukraine, while sporadic bombings are taking place in the capital Kiev. In this context, Zelensky's popularity continues to decline to historically low levels. His refusal to hold the elections that should have taken place in 2004 leads him to be perceived as an authoritarian leader. As a result, Ukrainians rise up in demonstrations demanding his resignation. Finally, they give in to the pressure and accept the surrender in early 2005, by which time Russia has already completely occupied the south of Ukraine. As for the Western allies, they are aware that the situation is not sustainable to continue supporting Kiev, so they decide to take the initiative and start negotiations with Russia. After internal discussions, it is concluded that the best option is the one that Minister Medvedev referred to at the time: the partition of Ukraine between Russia and the neighboring European countries. This decision is based on historical and ethnographic reasons that we will examine next. in addition to considering the lack of economic resources on the part of the Kyiv government to support the Ukrainian population, exhausted after so long at war. In this way, the western territories of Ukraine would join North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the European Union, which would guarantee their security, while Russia consolidates its control over the Black Sea. What we currently know as Ukraine would be reduced to the capital Kiev, Kievogrado, and the western areas of the Cherkasy and Dnipropetrovsk oblasts, located west of the Dnieper River. The conditions for Ukraine to remain as an independent state with that reduced territory involve the resignation of Zelensky's government and the formation of a new one that ensures its neutrality. This means that it would not commit to joining either North Atlantic Treaty Organization or the European Union, thus becoming a buffer state. In addition, for its reconstruction, it would receive support from both the West and Russia. As for the great victorious power, it would consolidate its control over Crimea and the territories it already considered its own, since the 2002 referendum, specifically the oblasts of Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. The oblasts of Mykolaiv and Odessa would be ceded to Russia, which would allow it to secure control over the Black Sea and establish territorial continuity towards the separatist Moldovan region of Transnistria. The government of Chisinau, fearful of suffering a similar fate to Ukraine, would accept the cession of Transnistria, a territory it actually hasn't controlled since its independence in 1991. The territories east of the Dnieper River, including the entirety of the Chernihiv, Zhytomyr, Poltava, and Kharkiv oblasts, as well as part of Cherkasy and Dnipropetrovsk, would form a new oblast with its capital in Kharkiv. This would be administered by Russia for about 20 years, after which a referendum on its belonging would be held, the result of which we all know in advance. Now let's look at the territories that would be assigned to the Western Allies for historical, ethnic, and economic reasons. Poland would be the country that would expand the most, as during its golden age, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth occupied all of Western Ukraine, territories that it recovered after the First World War with the foundation of the Second Polish Republic. The oblasts of Volyn, Rivne, Zhytomyr, Lviv, Ternopil, and Ivano-Frankivsk would become part of Poland, a country known for its historic anti-Russian policy. Therefore, the Western powers consider this a good idea to distance them from Russian influence. After all, the remainder of Ukraine would remain as a buffer state, thus avoiding any friction between the two. The next country on the list would be Romania, where I have personally seen how the recovery of Bessarabia is alluded to. This region includes all of Moldova and parts of southern Ukraine, where a considerable Romanian population is concentrated, which in the past was part of Greater Romania. In fact, today there are still about 400,000 Romanian speakers living in Ukraine, mainly in the Chernivtsi and Vinnytsia oblasts, which would then be annexed by Romania. Finally, we have the Transcarpathia Oblast, which was part of the Kingdom of Hungary until World War I, when it was annexed by newly created Czechoslovakia. It later became part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics after its victory on the Eastern Front during World War II. For this reason, the region has significant Hungarian, Slovak, and Rusin minorities. This area would be divided between Hungary and Slovakia, whose current governments have a favorable tendency towards Russia. For this reason, Transcarpathia would be the region most closely watched by Western powers. At this point, we return to reality. Although this scenario sounds discouraging for Ukrainians, there is something that is very clear. Both sides are not willing to negotiate. Russia is leading, and as it progresses, the impositions on Ukraine will become more severe, while the country increasingly suffers the devastating effects of war. The threat to their existence as a nation is evident, and this is just one of the possible outcomes that could emerge at the end of the conflict. What other scenarios do you think might occur? Don't forget to leave your comment and subscribe to the channel. Also, I leave in the description my social networks, and in case you want to see the new videos in pre-release and have a greater interaction with me, your donations on Patreon, honormanito.net. or channel members are welcome. See you next time.